This is Marshall Music Midlands. My name is Andrew and I want to discuss sound mixing with you guys. But I want to discuss the basics, the very fundamentals. We're not going to be talking about cabling or speakers or monitors. We're going to literally be talking about the console itself, and that's it. That's this guy. And in fact, this is the mixer that I'm going to be using for my demonstration because it's nice and simple, right? There's not a lot going on here. Nice and easy to use. The big thing is this gives us all of our core fundamentals without anything fancy. This is a 10-channel analog mixer. It is the Samson MDR 1064. Nice and simple, nice and easy to use, and it will really give us a good idea of how a console actually functions. In later videos, we might get into more complicated stuff, but for now, this is a very good starting point just to understand, what all of these knobs and controls do. Trust me, it's not as complicated as it seems. All right, now before we look at the console itself, we're going to look at the back of this mixer. And you will notice that firstly, we have a plug for a power supply. Sometimes these are kettle plugs. Most of the time these are kettle plugs. This one is kind of different. Then you have a main power switch here. And then you have a phantom power, which is the main reason that I wanted to show you the back of this console. The phantom power, all it does is it sends voltage through your XLRs. So it's used if you have a condenser mic. You don't need phantom power if you have a dynamic mic or anything else, specifically for condenser mics. Now that being said, let's have a look at the console itself. Firstly, the way I'm going to explain this and talk about it is I'm going to divide the console into two sections, inputs and outputs. Now you look at this console and it can be very overwhelming. Now the way to think about this is that each column is a different channel, which means that if you've learned what, let's say, this knob here does, you've actually learned what all of the white knobs along the bottom do. I mean, up until this point here, but the point is, because it's the same for each channel, right? But before we get to the knobs, let's talk about the jacks and the plugs here first. We have three types of jacks that you can plug into. You've got XLRs, which are for microphones. Then you've got line-ins and inserts, which are for instruments. The difference between these two is line-in is a mono, but insert is a stereo. All right, but important to note, it is still one jack. When you get to the stereo channels over here, it's going to be two jacks. We'll get there in just a minute. Then we have our gains. Now, your gain is the first volume that you use. As the signal enters into the mixer, it's the first volume, right? Then we've got low cuts. Now, low cut is a button that is used to essentially filter out all the frequencies, according to this mixer, 75 hertz and below. Well, what it's useful for is if you have a noise on your like there's a noise coming out the speaker, a hum or something like that, oftentimes just pressing that will actually get rid of that noise. But to be clear, this is not a one-size-fits-all solution. There can be different reasons for causing that hum, and one really needs to diagnose properly before just whacking that button. I see a lot of people will crank up the gain, have your level very low, and then think that they can fix that just by pressing that button. It's not that simple. So, in any case, the next sets of buttons here is your EQ, and you've got highs, mids, and lows. So this lets us adjust the sound quality, the volume, so to speak, of different frequencies. All right. So just to give you an idea of how this works, if we turned lows and mids completely off and highs completely up, you're going to end up with a very tinny sound. Okay. If you wanted to put a positive spin onto it, you might call it a bright sound, but at this setting, that's not bright, that's just tinny. If you turned your highs all the way down and your lows all the way up, you're going to end up with a very muddy sound, a dark sound. The positive spin on that would probably be warm sound, but that's not warm either, that's just terrible, it's muddy. Let's put those back to dead center. So basically, you can adjust how warm or how light our sound is with that. This is also very useful with vocals, for instance, I hope I get this the correct way around, but with male vocals, for instance, with my vocals, I tend to filter out some of the lows, and I tend to boost some of the highs and leave the mids where they are. That's just my voice. And that way it gets rid of some of the nasalness that exists in my voice, because I know that I happen to have a very nasally voice. Well, it's a slightly nasally voice when I sing. With female vocalists, I understand it's a different way around. You actually filter the highs out slightly, and you boost the lows a little bit. And of course, keyboards will have their own conventional mix, bass guitar's own conventional mix, and so on and so forth. And the idea is that you might set it to that and then tweak, right, and get it to sound good. So EQ is very useful to use. All right, now the next section to look at is our auxes. Now, auxes are just basically another type of line-outs that exists, which we're going to talk about, output that exists, which we'll talk about outputs in a minute. Auxes, 9 times out of 10, are monitors. So in this case, aux 1 and aux 2, aux 1 might be your stage left monitor, aux 2 might be stage right monitor, right? And it's channel specific, which means that on the left-hand channel, we might want to turn the vocalist in channel 1 down, but we might want to turn vocalist number 2 up. And you sort of work that out based on who's standing in front of which monitor and who needs to hear them themselves. Then we can talk about the next knob, which is panning. Panning is essentially to do with your main speakers. If I swing this all the way to the left, the sound will be coming out of the left speaker, and if I swing it all the way to the right, it will come out of the right-hand speaker. Panning is also a super useful thing, especially in churches, I've found. When you have a lot of people on stage, to try to get rid of muddiness, a useful way to do it is to make use of panning. So you might, for instance, let's say if I'm looking at the stage, I got my worship leader or band leader in the center stage, they might be panned to the middle, but my keyboardist might be to the right of them, so we'll pan that to the right-hand speaker slightly. We don't want to crank it to the right, but a little bit to the right. Our rhythm guitarist is on our left, so we'll pan that a bit to the left. Bass guitarist is further left, and drummer is right in the center, and so on and so forth. The idea is that we are using the speakers to space out the sound of it. And that can actually go a long way to helping with a muddy sound, believe it or not. I highly recommend experimenting with that. And then finally we have our level knob, which is essentially a volume control like the gain, except this is our volume that we use to adjust the signal after we've made changes to it. So again, difference between gain and level here, or faders, sometimes they have faders. Your gain is your volume before we make any changes to that signal, and your channel is your volume after we've made any changes. All right, let's move to the outputs. And let's look at these jacks first. I want to point out we have main mix. You've got 2 auxes and 2 instruments or speaker jacks, Canon jacks, quarter-inch, whatever term you want to use. This is basically gives you a choice as to how you want to plug your speakers in. Those 2 are the same channel. Those 2 are the same channel, left and right. Right? Control room is for monitors, control room monitors, sometimes for studio use. This could also be for stage monitors. Minor issue with this is it doesn't look like you can adjust separate monitors. You sort of have to have, you got like one volume for this, if I'm looking at this. Oh yeah, there's my control room volume there. Let's have a quick look at our line-ins. These 2 channels specifically, you'll notice, don't have XLRs, and that's because these are stereo channels. So you've got left and right. I got that right? Yeah, sorry, left. left and right and left and right. The difference between this stereo and that stereo is that this is one jack that has a stereo connection, whereas the stereo is split into two jacks. So common use for this would be keyboards, for example. Your stereo aux returns are for usually what they plug into here is effects units like choruses, reverbs, compressors, things like that. Aux sends, well, that's your two monitors that were controlled by these two guys here. So if I was plugging in monitors, I'd probably plug them into there. Alternatively, you could actually plug, if you had IEMs, you could plug them into there as well. Phones refers to headphones, right? So for us guys doing sound, we might plug in a set of headphones to make it easier for us to mix. These are just toggle buttons to activate certain things, to aux 1, to mix, to control room, so you can sort of decide how you want to use things. These RCA connectors, we've discussed that in a previous video. This back in the day could have been to plug a CD player in, but you can also plug a laptop into here. You can plug various types of digital things into here. And then finally, we've got our level here for our headphones or control room. And that's the basics of how a mixer works. Okay, now one more thing that I want to demonstrate really quickly is, let's say you've got everything plugged in and you need to now give some volume. How do we actually set this up? I mean, what do we adjust first? There's 3 different volumes. How do we do this and not get feedback suddenly? To demonstrate, I'm going to actually move this mixer over and I'm going to bring this one in just to show you, because you're more than likely going to have a mixer with sliders in any case. Hang on, let's move this one out of the way. I'll bring that back into frame in a second. Okay, so we can't really, that should fit. All right, so again, our gains are these guys up at the top. I'll just double check that. Yeah, these are gains, these are our sliders, and our main mix is these 2 knobs, because you've now got control for left and right. What you would do, the way that I was taught, was you want to move these up into the 0. There's actually a marking there for it. You want to move this up to 0. There's a marking, assuming we're testing this channel first, right? And then your gains should all be zeroed out. And what you want to do is you want to gradually turn up gain until you get signal. The idea is that if you crank your gain too much, you're going to get noise. But the point is you up and up and up until you are just starting to get some buzz or anything like that. And then once that's done, you bring it down just a touch. So you're now sort of, your gain is now set, you see. And the rest of your adjustment you can make here. And that's how I was taught to start a mix. So meaning that you would go through each channel, right? We'll start with our vocalist, and you gradually get it to the right volume. And let's say it turns out there's about the loudest you can go without getting noise. Now we do the next channel, and maybe it turns out that's the loudest, and so on and so forth. Now we want to adjust, because now one person is louder than another. So you know what, we can turn down, say that's our band leader, so they need to be loud. We can bring this one down a touch so that you're mixing properly. And that's how you used to, at least that's how I was taught to set these things up. Well, that's all I've got time for in this video. I don't want to make this too complicated. We haven't talked about how to set anything up yet, because that's not really what this was about. The whole point of this video was just the console itself. That was our video on the mixer. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any suggestions, any particular mixers you'd like me to discuss on the channel, I can do that. Analog or digital, I can help you out. If you have any specific questions regarding sound, let us know. There's plenty of people here who've got that kind of knowledge. Feel free to stop by the shop at any points if you want to buy anything you see behind me or anything else you've seen in any of these videos. Do us a favor, like, share and subscribe. We are trying to grow this channel a little bit. Thank you so much for your support. and I'll see you in the next one.